Welcome back to the NC State Insider Podcast. I'm your host and lead beat writer, Tucker Sennett, covering your NC State Wolfpack, and we're back again with another Sights and Sounds episode for NC State football. The Wolfpack dominated the Campbell Camels last night, or yesterday afternoon, I should say, eh, in a 56 to 10 victory. I was there covering the game and kind of took it all in for you. Provided some observations in a observations piece, and obviously wrote your usual game story. So you can check those out on the NC State on SI website for more in-depth details about the actual game. But in terms of the sights and sounds, once again, Carter-Finley, pretty large crowd, not as crowded as it has been in the past few weeks because of the FCS opponent, is my guess. And also just some disappointment in the way that the season has gone up to this point. But the Wolfpack did what it needed to do. It got a win over a vastly inferior FCS opponent, which was really critical for this team moving forward into this really daunting stretch that they have coming up. You're going to South Bend, Indiana to play Notre Dame next week. And after that, you get the bye, but some really tough opponents coming down the pipe as well in Pittsburgh, Georgia Tech, Miami, Florida State, and then you finish with that rivalry game against the University of North Carolina. But back to the Campbell game, it was interesting to see a lot of these younger guys get a lot of playing time and step up. NC State came out and scored the first eight touchdowns of the game and really didn't have to put a lot of effort in most of the third and fourth quarters. Um, so we got to see some players that we wouldn't normally see, some guys who popped in. And also at the beginning of the game, some interesting starting choices. Sod Brown moved over from nickel to safety, and Javon Bailey got the start at safety. I could be wrong. I could be flipping that. It could be the other way around, but I'm pretty sure they moved Brown over to that safety spot as they continue to tinker with those positions. Ronnie Royal got a lot of playing time after sort of really struggling in last week's game, which might help a redshirt freshman like him sort of continue to develop and figure out how these games feel when he's actually out there for critical playing time. The offensive line reshuffle seemed to work pretty well. Obviously, Campbell's not really going to test things super well, but Spike Souls hung in there, and the rest of the line held up and allowed CJ Bailey to pass for over 300 yards. One thing I noticed about Bailey, yes, he had a fantastic performance statistically, over 300 yards, four touchdown passes, a really great bounce back for him after a couple of weeks of struggles through the ball incredibly accurately for the most part. But on some of his deep shots, it seemed like he was either some of that pace that he had on that ball from the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. It was missing a little bit. Some of these were underthrows, and the receivers were able to go up and make plays because this Campbell defense was just so overmatched. But some of them were more 50-50 balls than they should have been. But in this game, it's more like a 70-30 ball, if that makes sense, just because of the size differential on a lot of these matchups. And it just looked like he wasn't putting the same oomph if on his passes that he had been in prior weeks. I'm not overly concerned about it. I don't think there's any sort of, reason for that. I think it just sometimes, you have a little more power on your arm than you normally do, and sometimes you don't. And that's just the way it goes. Sometimes got to see two other quarterbacks. Lex Thomas came in, you know, uh, sort of did his job and didn't move the ball exceptionally well. Will Wilson through his first passes of the season as a true and of his college career as a true freshman, did throw an interception, which I'm sure he'll be a little disappointed about, but he ran for another touchdown early in the game, and it was probably good to get him some experience throwing the football as he's had this game experience running, because I do think that's a weapon for this NC State team moving forward into these really difficult opponents, because he's a guy that teams are going to see and expect, okay, short yardage run coming. And I think there's an opportunity for NC State to sort of sneak in a maybe a shot play with him, if he's confident enough in his arm. So we'll see how that goes moving forward. Excuse me. Um, Quick day for Hollywood Smothers. Just a casual 4 carries for 123 yards, a touchdown, and obviously had the the 3 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown, or maybe it was 2 catches. I could have gotten that whole stat line wrong. Let me, for the people, let me double check. He had 4 carries for 123 yards, and he had 2 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. There you go. So I was spot on. 6 total touches in the game. Incredible performance. So that was, you know, good to see Hollywood back on track for the Wolfpack fans. I'm sure that was something they were a little bit upset about after last week. Maybe the worst storyline to come out of this game, and then I'll wrap things up here and let folks go and enjoy their Sunday. The punt returning has now become a problem, but I think NC State found its solution. They left Teddy Hoffman in there after he muffed a punt, and allowed Campbell to go and score on their next drive because of the muff punt, and came back out, muffed another punt. Luckily, NC State recovered this one, but I think the feeling on that NC State sideline was, okay, there's something wrong here. Teddy Hoffman clearly has lost some confidence, from a special teams standpoint. So, and really hasn't done much as a pass catcher. And so NC State made the decision to move on to Terrell Anderson at the punt return spot. Wesley Grimes had been in the spot at a point this season. I want to say maybe in the first game. He's dealt with injuries over the last few weeks, but has played. He didn't do much in the spot. So I think they just wanted to see what they had in Anderson, and he catches his first punt, and had LaCorian Hodge not committed a penalty, which really didn't affect the play all that much, making this even more unfortunate for the Wolfpack, and it really irritated Dave Doran. Um, but Anderson ran his first punt back for a touchdown. So clearly they have a weapon in him, and he continues to be one of the top receivers on this team. Really a surprise after, murmurs throughout fall camp that Hoffman might be pushing for his spot in the slot, and he's been able to move around all over the receiver room. He's been one of those, as Keenan Jackson said before the season, one of those versatile guys that they really wanted. And boy, has he been versatile with those long arms and that speed. He's really got a second gear that he can hit, which is super impressive. So good news for the Wolfpack. They seem to have their punt returner of the future. Bad news is the punting continues to be a problem. Another special teams blunder. Charlie Burtwhistle fired a kick out of bounds that also really irritated Doran. Those are mistakes that, if you commit those kind of penalties against Notre Dame, it's going to be a really, really long afternoon there in South Bend next week. So those are things that NC State has to be cleaned up, or has to clean up between now and then. That's all I got from the sights and sounds for the Campbell game. As for the coming week, it's going to be a lot of basketball. I'll be going out to Charlotte for the ACC tip-off. We'll have coverage of, NC State and some of their rivals. I'll be out there Tuesday for the other schools to sort of get a read on them. And obviously we'll report back to y'all as the season moves along, and as the days move along. And then I will not be traveling to South Bend. So we'll be watching that one together, and I'll have a post-game show for you all that day. Instead of our usual game day preview podcast, we'll just be doing the predictions and such. And that game will be on Peacock, so we'll all be watching together, and we'll talk about the Wolfpack's success or lack thereof in South Bend, and go from there. As always, if you want more content, you can feel free to follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Senate Tucker. You can also follow the website at Wolfpack on SI, and you can find daily episodes of the NC State Insider Podcast on the Sports Videos on SI YouTube channel. Have a great day, everybody.